chapter 8, and we'll look at 1 to 8. But I did take half a moment to try and think about this. And so it's Dare to Dream month. And as Sue said, as a church, as a community that embraces soul and life church, because we're really the same thing, we're asking God to lead us and give us God-like dreams for the future. It's Dare to Dream month, and we're presenting our personal dreams to God. And so I thought, as we dare to dream and as we read Acts chapter 8, I thought, let's focus on the God that, because we could focus on a lot of things in the passage 8, but let's focus on the God that we're going to dare to dream with and say, well, what is that fellow like as we go through? So chapter 8, verse 1 of Acts. It's a pretty encouraging passage. It says, Saul approved of their killing him, being Stephen. And on that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. But Saul began to destroy the church, going from house to house. He dragged off both men and women, and he put them all in prison. And it's a bit hard for us because we're not in that, year 63. But I want to go back and try and imagine what it'd be like if we were churchy people reading it back in the day. Because when you read it again, and Saul approved of their killing Stephen. So hopefully you know that Saul is Paul and Paul is Saul. Saul, Paul, it's the same guy. And when Acts was written, Paul, who was Saul, was like the super duper mega Christian superhero on the planet. He was the man. Most of the rest of Acts, when you read it, is going to be all about that guy because he was the superhero Christian at the time. Nearly everyone who read Acts back in the day would have been a Christian who'd heard the stories and was looking up to Saul Paul and saying, wow, what a great guy. I want to be just like him. Paul, the Christian superhero. But think what it was like maybe for them back in the day. I did some Googles. Sylvester Stallone was once homeless and now he's a megastar. What the heck? And Bill Gates, that guy dropped out of college and now he's mega rich. What the heck? And on TV at the moment, Vladimir Zelensky, he was a bodgy comedian on Dancing with the Stars, and now he's an inspiration to the whole planet as he leads his people through this conflict with Russia. What the heck? And Paul, the Christian superhero, approved of them killing Stephen. What the heck? He's the man. And at Soul Cafe, we have this saying we use all the time. We bring it out every couple of weeks and we say, everyone is welcome because nobody's perfect and anything is possible. And with our God, anything is possible. Even Saul, the Christian killer, being transformed into Paul, the apostle who brought life in Jesus' name to the known world. Life Church, as you dare to dream this month, let me encourage you to remember that anything is possible. Even Saul the killer becoming Paul the apostle. Anything's possible. And so verse 1, Saul approved of their killing Stephen. And on that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem. and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. But Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off both men and women and put them in prison. So sadly, I'm starting to get a bit old now, and I've met a lot of people in my time, and I seem to meet people all the time around churchy type places that seem to want to suggest that when you follow Jesus, it's going to be pain-free, problem-free. I meet people all the time around churchy places that seem to suggest that when you follow Jesus and I behave like a good little boy for Jesus, that Jesus will bless me and my life will be peaches and cream and all super lovely. But when we look at this passage, Stephen followed Jesus, and that's why they killed him. And Stephen was a good little boy, and they stoned him to death. Stephen was such a good little boy. If you flick back just a couple of verses, such a good little boy that even when they were killing him, what did he do? He prayed blessing upon those who were killing him. I will never be that good a boy. Stephen was that good a boy, and yet they slaughtered him. He prayed for his attackers even while they were attacking him. In Life Church, as you dare to dream with God, remember that anything is possible with our God, but also remember that God doesn't necessarily stop bad things happening. God didn't stop Stephen getting stoned. God didn't stop the church in Jerusalem being persecuted. And God didn't stop your wife leaving you. And God didn't stop Russia invading Ukraine. And I bet you wish the guest speaker was here now. Or at least the fifth stringer, because it's pretty morbid so far. But I do meet lots of people, and I meet some other people who seem to suggest, and this one I actually get a whole lot more. I meet people all the time who seem to suggest that maybe God's a bit dodgy. And I get down that argument, I understand where they're coming from, and maybe there's part of me that goes, yeah, what about that? I meet people who seem to suggest that if God can stop bad things happening, because anything's possible, he's all powerful, they seem to suggest that if God can stop bad things happening, but he doesn't stop bad things happening, then maybe he's a bit dodgy. Maybe there's a bit something wrong with that if he can stop bad things happening, but he doesn't stop bad things happening. But let's keep reading for a minute. Maybe there's something in the next section that can save me a bit, and we can end on a positive. Verse 4. Those who had been scattered preached the word everywhere they went. Philip went down to a city in Samaria and proclaimed the Messiah there. When the crowds heard Philip and saw the signs he performed, they all paid close attention to what he said. For with shrieks, impure spirits came out of many, and many who were paralyzed or lame were healed. So there was great joy in that city. And this is my favorite thing to see in the scriptures. And you see it everywhere when you start looking for it, but we're just going to look here. But it's my favorite thing in the scriptures because this is so super cool. So you've got Saul and the Pharisees and the Jews persecuting the church, and they're trying to kill it. But then God used Saul and the Pharisees and the Jews and their persecuting of the church to grow the church. And God used Saul and the Pharisees and the Jews persecuting the church to set free people from sin and darkness and sickness. I mean, it says what happened in that city? Paralyzed girls got up and walked. Lame guys got up and danced around and did a little jig. And so there was great joy in the city. Saul and the Pharisees and the Jews killed Stephen, and they persecuted the people, and they tried their best to make everyone so miserable that they would stop following Jesus and stop mentioning his name. But God used all that same stuff to fill that city with joy. Now, surely that blows you away just a little bit. Surely that confounds you just a little bit. I mean, how big must God be if he can do something like that? In verse 3, it says Saul began to destroy the church. So I struggle with English, so it probably surprises you that I know any Greek, but I do know a bit of Greek. And the Greek word translated destroy here is the word normally used of wild animals. We might in English use the word savaged, savaged. Like a lion savages a little baby antelope and destroys it, and there's just a mark left on the ground when he's done. Like a lion savages and destroys a baby antelope, so Saul savaged and destroyed the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off both men and women. He put them in prison. And this is the super mind-blowing bit. God didn't stop Saul from doing what he intended to do, but neither did Saul's savaging stop God doing what God intended to do. And that's amazing when you think about it. God didn't stop Saul, and he rarely stops other people from doing what they intend to do. But Saul doing what he did didn't stop God doing what he intended to do. So Saul tried to savage the church, but God filled the church and the city and people's lives with joy. Because nothing can stop God from doing what God plans to do, because he's God Almighty, and he will do what he plans to do. So let me say this again just really quickly another way, because it is a bit crazy and it just takes some time to get your head around it sometimes. But we need to be clear that God never promised to prevent bad things happening so that you could be joyous. But God did promise to give you joy and hope and peace when bad things happen. And so, Life Church, as you dare to dream with God, remember that anything is possible for God. But while anything is possible for God, God doesn't always stop bad things happening. But also remember that bad things happening doesn't stop God from filling the city with great joy, because nothing is impossible for God. And so, Life Church, as we dare to dream, as you dare to dream, we're asking God to leave us and give us God-like and God-sized dreams for the future. As we dare to dream, we are presenting our personal dreams and hopes to God. And so I add my meager words to Sue's encouragement this morning. Will you grab that piece of paper sometime in the next few days, and will you write something down? Will you dare to dream with a God that is so huge and so powerful and so astounding that he can give you joy and hope even when the worst of things might happen. So call it a moment before you put pen to paper. Just stop for a second, because I haven't prepared anything else. But hey, stop for a second and listen. In this passage and in my babblings and in your reflections, where is God and what is he saying to you right now? We follow a God who's real and relational and he speaks. Where is God? And what is he saying to you right now? And I don't know what God is saying to you right now. But I do know if you follow him, it may or may not be safe. And I don't know what God is saying to you right now, but I do know that if you follow him, you'll find joy and hope and peace that goes beyond the circumstances around you. I don't know what God is saying to this church, to this organization of Life Church and Soul together as one family. But I do know that if we follow him, there'll be great joy in the city. And there is already great joy in the city because we are already following him. I want to finish with one super quick story, a soul story. It's a bit similar to Sue's story she said earlier with Nick, but I just want to finish with um, one soul story. But it's like Saul Paul, same guy. Soul Cafe, Life Church, same thing. It's all one. So it's really a Life Church story. There's a fellow who comes in and he's really kind of set up his official table down where Darren's sitting this morning, and he comes and sits there at nearly every meal. But it wasn't like that a little while ago. He said, I started coming to Soul around 2021 when I was destitute and living out of a garage about 2 blocks over there, which was in an abandoned building in the CBD in Newcastle. I was feeling very low, hungry, but especially feeling unwanted. I walked past Soul one day and saw people lining up. So I asked, what is this? And I joined the queue. The services at Soul provided me with blankets, winter clothes, meals, and food to take away. A Soul team member was chatting to me and asked me about where I was living. And I told him. He said, let's see what we can do. And working together, we got a referral to housing. And now I have my own unit, which I'm happily living in. I would say about Soul Cafe that it's one of the best services for disadvantaged people in New South Wales. The volunteers and staff are so caring for us, and their approach to allow people to use their services to do better for themselves is a measure of success. And then he says, this is my family. There's a guy who felt unwanted in the city. And now he says, I have a family in the city. And friends, you better believe it. You better believe it that there is joy in Newcastle because Life Church and Soul Cafe exist, and because God is present in us and through us, there is joy in Newcastle.